In the early 1600s, travellers along the coastal roads of southwest Scotland started disappearing without a trace. Horses found wandering without riders, carriages abandoned, torn clothing scattered on the path. Locals blamed thieves, wild animals, anything but the truth, because the truth, the real truth, was something no one could have imagined. When the government finally investigated, they uncovered a coastal cave so deep and so dark that even today, divers refuse to map the full interior. Inside that cave, they found human remains stacked like firewood, and the remains were fresh. This discovery would eventually inspire one of the most disturbing horror films ever made, The Hills Have Eyes. And it all started with one man, Alexander Sawney Bean. Alexander Bean's early life is barely documented. Some historians say he was born in East Lothian, Scotland. Others argue he never existed at all, that he was a boogeyman invented to scare travellers. But the legend says this: Sawney Bean came from a long line of violent men. His father was reportedly a ditch digger and a murderer for hire. Sawney grew up doing whatever he had to do to survive, stealing, fighting, drifting from village to village. By his late teens, he met a woman named Black Agnes Douglas. And just like him, she was an outcast. Rumors spread that Agnes had been accused of witchcraft, animal mutilation, and luring neighbors into the woods. Together, they left society behind. They traveled to the rugged coastline of Ayrshire, a place filled with cliffs, fog, and miles of uninhabited wilderness. And that's where they found it, a sea cave, one that stretched hundreds of feet into the cliffs, disappearing into tunnels where the tide rose and fell like breathing lungs. This became their home, their kingdom, and eventually, their hunting ground. At first, the disappearances were subtle. A merchant who never reached the next village, a traveller who left an inn and was never seen again. A farmer was found dead, his horse still grazing nearby. But the bodies they did find were strange. Torn apart, limbs missing, bones stripped clean. Locals blamed wolves, or bandits, or witches in the woods. But the truth was hiding in the cliffs. Sawney and Agnes began ambushing travellers on the coastal road, dragging them into the cave. And what they did after is the part that makes this story so infamous. The legend says this family began eating the victims. Nothing went to waste. Meat salted and stored in jars, bones tossed to the back of the cave, clothes burned or kept, jewelry melted down or traded. And as the years passed, the family grew. Sawney and Agnes reportedly had 8 sons, 6 daughters, and then, through incest, dozens of grandchildren. A clan of as many as 48 people, all living in total darkness inside the cave. No contact with the outside world, no schooling, no sunlight, just hunting, feeding, surviving. The disappearances spiraled. Travelers avoided the coast entirely. Merchants started forming armed caravans. But still, people vanished. After nearly 25 years, the Sawney Bean Clan was unstoppable. Until one night, they attacked the wrong couple. A man and his wife were returning from a market fair. Around dusk, the Beans ambushed them, dragging the wife from a horse and stabbing her repeatedly. But the husband was a fighter. He drew his sword and kept them back. Just when he was about to be overwhelmed, a group of travelers came around the bend, scaring the Beans back into the darkness. For the first time in decades, the clan left a surviving witness. The husband reported everything: the ambush, the numbers, the cave direction, the inhuman way they moved. Word reached Scotland's King James VI. He immediately dispatched an armed search party of 400 men, including soldiers, bloodhounds, local trackers. They swept the coastline until the dogs picked up a scent in the tidal rocks. They found the cave entrance, narrow, jagged, hidden by water at high tide. When the soldiers went inside, nothing could have prepared them for what they discovered. The deeper they went, the worse it got. The first chamber had piles of bones, human bones, gnawed down to the marrow. Further in, they found racks of partially butchered limbs, salted meat hanging from hooks, and piles of clothing stripped from victims. Some accounts say the soldiers had to wade through ankle-deep human remains. Others say the smell alone made men vomit on sight. But the worst part wasn't the remains. The worst part was the family standing silently in the darkness, dozens of them, staring back at the torchlight. Women, children, all born inside this nightmare. None of them had ever stepped outside the cave. They were captured without a fight, not because they were afraid, but because they didn't understand what was happening. They had never seen anything like soldiers before. That's when the investigation began. The entire family, all 40-something of them, were taken to Edinburgh, but they were never given a trial. The crimes were so horrific that the government decided justice would be immediate. Historical accounts describe the sentencing this way. The men were executed first, hands and feet cut off, left to bleed out. The women and children were executed next, burned alive. And just like that, the Sawney Bean Clan was gone. But the legend, that never died. Historians argue that the Sawney Bean Clan may not have been real. Why? Because there are no official arrest records, no court transcripts, no burial logs, and the story didn't appear in print until 200 years later. So either the Bean Clan was real, but the government covered it up, or the story was a Scottish folktale used to demonize certain families or scare children. What is documented? Travelers did disappear in that region. The cave is real, and massive human remains were found in similar coastal caves, and cannibalism during famines did happen in Scotland. So the truth, somewhere in the middle, real vanishings wrapped in folklore. Wes Craven, director of The Hills Have Eyes, confirmed this himself. He was reading about Sawney Bean's cannibal clan when he realized the real horror isn't monsters. It's what humans become when they're pushed outside society. Craven simply modernized the idea. Instead of a cave, a desert, instead of Scottish cannibals, mutated nuclear test survivors instead of 1600s roads, the American Southwest. But the core idea is identical. A hidden family, shaped by isolation, preying on travelers. The Beans were the blueprint. Whether Sawney Bean was a real man or a legend meant to terrify travelers, one thing is certain. The world has always had dark corners, places where people disappear, where nature hides what society refuses to see. And out of one of those dark corners, a sea cave in Scotland, came a story so disturbing that it survived 400 years and eventually became one of the most infamous horror films ever made. Because sometimes the scariest things aren't found in the movies. Sometimes they're found in history. That's the horrifying true story behind The Hills Have Eyes. A legend so disturbing it survived for centuries, jumping from whispered folklore to printed history to one of the most unsettling horror films ever made. Whether Sawney Bean and his family really lived in that cave, or whether the story was twisted, exaggerated, or invented entirely, almost doesn't matter, because the fear it tapped into is very real. The fear of taking a wrong turn, the fear of isolated roads where no one can hear you, the fear of vanishing without a trace. Stories like this stick around because at some point in history, something close enough happened to make people believe it could be true. And just like the film it inspired, the Sawney Bean story forces us to ask a simple question. What happens when people go so far into the dark, they stop being human? Maybe the beans were real, maybe they weren't, but the cave still exists. Travelers really did disappear, and every year, hikers exploring that coastline report, hearing strange echoes coming from deep inside the cliffs, noises they swear aren't the tide. So, is the legend dead, or is something still out there? As always, thank you for watching.